Hello and welcome to this HRD Connect webinar, How to Use Technology to Build Connections and Improve Engagement, sponsored by Limeade. I'm Michael Hocking and I'm Deputy Editor of HRD Connect. Now, you won't hear too much from me in this presentation because we've got a lot of insights to get through, so I'll shortly be handing over to our two presenters. But what I will say is we have two polls throughout the presentation, so please have your clicking fingers at the ready to answer those. And also we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So any questions you do have throughout, any burning questions, please keep those coming in the Q&A section throughout, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our speakers. We have Lauren Franklin, Senior Brand Manager from Limeade, and Dr. Laura Hamill, PhD, Chief People Officer and Chief Science Officer at Limeade. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Lauren. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for kicking us off. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody joining us today, wherever you are in the world. My name is Lauren Franklin. I'm actually based on the West Coast in Seattle, so it's still pretty early for me, but I'm so excited to start my day with this conversation around using technology to increase engagement and build connections. I wanted to just take a second to, introduce myself and what I do at Limeade. I'm a senior brand manager focused on engagement and inclusion, and I really care about helping folks like you who are trying to drive these efforts at your company. And what Laura and I wanted to do is just take a second and acknowledge what's going on in our current environment and the pressures being placed on employees right now and the uncertainty as a result of COVID-19. And knowing that things like engagement can sometimes feel like, gosh, is this what we should be focusing on right now? Is this the top priority? Do we need to wait on these efforts? But what we really want to do today is show you how, that putting your employees at the center of what you do and really caring for your employees can help them feel engaged, and especially thinking about these little day-to-day moments and how those matter so much for your employees. Those things are really important, and especially right now during this current environment. So we hope that not only can we give you some ideas for how to show care in times like these, but also leave you with some ideas for the future and how you can tackle engagement at your organization far and beyond what's going on right now. So with that, I'm going to pass to Dr. Laura Hamill. It's always my honor to be presenting with her, so I will go ahead and pass over to you, Laura, to introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks so much, Lauren. It is so great to be with you all today. My name is Laura. I am the Chief People Officer and Chief Science Officer at Limeade. I have a PhD in organizational psychology, so I really get to work on topics that are related to employee engagement and inclusion and organizational culture and well-being, really the topics that have to do with creating great places to work. So I'm really excited to be with you today. So Lauren mentioned, we kind of toyed with, should we even be talking about this right now? And really with the idea of, is engagement, employee engagement, a luxury for us? Is that too much for us to be asking for when people are really worried about their physical health, about their mental health, about their families, their friends? Is this the right topic? And what we really kind of honed in on is we just feel strongly, and the science really supports it, that employee engagement, it matters to people and it matters to businesses. And I'm really confident that those companies, those organizations who've been thinking about engagement before this coronavirus crisis, they're in a better spot right now compared to those companies that haven't cared about their employees' engagement. So this commitment to engagement likely means that there's loyalty and commitment from your employees right now. So we decided that we still felt really strongly about this topic. So during this time, I've been thinking about my own engagement at work. And in some odd ways, I could say that my engagement has improved. I have a little bit more time than I did before when I tended to travel a lot. And I think that it's helped me have a little time to think a little bit more, to be a little more thoughtful, to be a little more creative. But it's such an odd time. I think a lot of us are kind of feeling lonely. We don't have that chance to be able to, run into people in the hallways and connect with them as human beings. And so the loneliness, I think, is there, even though all of us are on, Zoom and GoToMeeting all day long. It still doesn't feel as much of that human connection. It's just also such a stressful time for people. One of my employees is pregnant, and she also has 2 small kids, and her husband works full-time too, and I can just see it in her that how hard it is to try to participate in meetings when she's got, little kids crawling all over the place. So it's so hard for so many people. So some things I'm trying to do during this time, I'm really trying to create more of those informal connections with people, really trying to reach out to them, to replace the things that would happen when I just see people in the hallway. And I'm also, trying to really think about the work. If we have a little bit of time to be thoughtful, are we working on the right things? So we're excited about this topic. We felt like we should move forward and let's talk about employee engagement. So we're going to start with the definition of engagement and really dig into what it is, and then think about engagement really through the lens of the employee. And, think about how could technology help us think a little bit differently about employee engagement? Like what could we do that's different from what we've done in the past? So, and then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. Before we do that, though, we wanted to go ahead and do a poll question. So here's the question for you, and we hope everybody participates. To what extent is focusing on employee engagement part of your job? I think this helps us a lot to get a feel for what your focus is in this audience. So if you could answer one of these 4 options: fully focus on engagement, one of your primary responsibilities, a small part, or not currently part of my responsibilities. So go ahead and submit your answer to that first poll question.
So Laura, as people are taking a second to input their response, I'm curious, somebody like you that's a chief science officer who studies this, as well as a chief people officer trying to implement this, but knowing you have many other responsibilities, where do you categorize yourself?
Good question, Lauren. I would say I'm fully focused on engagement. I really believe that engagement it's the trick, right? It's the secret to creating an organization that not only is a great place to work, but gets people and business results that we need. So you're right. I have both of these roles, and I get to study things, and then I get to put them help put them into place too. And man, it's hard to actually implement and really be consistent with these kinds of things. So yeah, it's funny you asked me that, Lauren. All right.
I can imagine.
Let's look and see what our responses are. Oh, interesting. So a good chunk of you look at that, the combination of fully focused and one of your primary responsibilities. That's like 3/4 of the people have engagement as a big part of their job. And only a tiny bit, 2%, not currently part of your responsibilities, and 24% with a small part. So that's super helpful to know that the people who are listening today really have engagement in their job description. It sounds like it's part of something that they really care a lot about. So that's really helpful for us to know. All right, so let's dig in. So when we think about this idea of first defining employee engagement, I think there's some interesting context for us to consider. I know it's been around for a long time, and I have been just completely fascinated by the topic of engagement, but I think that there's so much opportunity for organizations to really still evolve in this space. And what I mean by that is I see kind of 2 big mistakes organizations tend to make. The first mistake is thinking about employee engagement as just an employee survey. And don't get me wrong, I'm one of those survey writers, right? Like, I geek out about all the research that it takes to create a really great survey. I love surveys. In fact, surveys and survey development and validation really has been a big part of my career. So I'm all about a good survey. But if you take a step back, it's kind of interesting, fascinating even, how we've distilled employee engagement down to an annual survey or even, a biannual survey. That somehow we think if we do a survey, we can check the box and say we're done with employee engagement. So it really feels like we tend to be overly focused on the measurement piece and not focused enough on the action of how we actually improve employee engagement. So think about like all of the emphasis in most organizations around making sure people are participating, communicating response rates by different leader, all the yay, let's go take the survey. And then after the fact, we don't have as many tools, ways of communicating, and processes around the action piece, how we take action. So I would really argue that it's overly focused on measurement and not focused enough on action. It's also not focused enough in really seeing how the day-to-day experience of an employee is about engagement, right? That it's not necessarily these big programs and initiatives that we do, but it's a lot about what happens in the day-to-day. And if you think about it that way, then doing a survey once a year or once every other year is just not frequent enough. So the surveys are really just too infrequent. So that's the first big mistake I see, is really thinking of engagement as an employee survey. The second mistake I see organizations making is thinking of engagement only through the lens of how it helps the business. So that probably sounds weird, because I know that a lot of us know that that's a great lever to have to talk about how engagement's related to business results, and I think you should do that. But I think what I see is some HR leaders really just defining engagement only from the perspective of how it helps the business. So I'll ask them how they're defining it, and they'll say it's discretionary effort, or it's how employees go above and beyond. And they're really not thinking about engagement from the perspective of what it means to an employee. What does it feel like to be engaged as an employee? And because the problem with only thinking about it from a discretionary effort perspective or above and beyond perspective, is it doesn't feel human, and it definitely doesn't feel mutual. It just feels like, as an employee, the employer's trying to wring out everything they can from me, trying to get the most out of me without there being a mutual investment or commitment back. And so what I also think happens when we do this is it means that organizations just don't own up to their role in creating the conditions for engagement. I think they almost feel like they treat engagement like a personality trait, right? Like you're born engaged or not engaged, and don't think about, wait, what is it we're doing as an organization to create those conditions? So that's the second mistake I see a lot of organizations making, is really thinking of engagement only through the lens of how it helps the business. I really think we need to think about it from that perspective, the impact on the business, but also how we think about employees in that mix and what it feels like for employees to be engaged, and how we do more of that. So let's dig into this actual definition. So employee engagement is a deep connection and sense of purpose at work that creates extra energy and commitment. So what we're trying to get to with this definition is that perspective from the employee, that connection piece, that sense of purpose. So when you're an employee who's engaged, you just feel so deeply connected to your work that you think about it a lot, that you feel an identity really with your work, that you feel responsible, you feel inspired. And that emotional connection really leads you to do better work, right? You connect the dots more, you come up with new ideas. and you really are you're truly committed to your work and the company. I use the the analogy of, do you want to go to work most days, right? In the olden days when we were, many of us, in the car to get to work, do you want to go there? At least most days, right? Some of us have, hard days or bad days, but do you want to drive to work? Are you excited to get there and dig in? Are you excited to talk to your coworkers? And that feeling of that excitement, of that energy, it's good for employees and it's good for employers. So we want to create more of that. One of the things you can see when people are engaged is they spend extra effort on their work, and they think more deeply and more broadly about how to solve problems. Because people who are engaged just have a different way they think about their work. You could kind of take that and flip it, right? And think about, what are people who are disengaged like? And people who are disengaged tend to say things like, that's not on my job description, right? That's not my responsibility. That's not in my little world that I've drawn a boundary around. While people who are engaged just tend not to think that way. They tend to think, wait, I'm solving this problem that is maybe cuts across jobs or cuts across responsibilities. And people who are disengaged just don't tend to speak up. They don't feel valued. They don't really have a voice. So it's important to really understand what those kind of feelings of connection, they result in real behaviors that employees who are engaged, that we want more of those, right? Those kinds of behaviors. So a couple things I'd like to kind of clarify some differences on, and this is something I tend to see people do. Employee engagement is truly different from job satisfaction. Sometimes people will say, hey, look at my employee engagement survey, and I'll take a look and say, that's really a job satisfaction survey. Job satisfaction is a lot more about just evaluation of my work components. So, for example, I like my benefits, I like my manager, I have the resources I need to do my job. So job satisfaction is really just, you can think of it as a starting point. You need to have some of those basics in place in order for you to then be engaged. But on top of job satisfaction, is that emotional connection there? Is that sense of energy there? That's what's different between job satisfaction and employee engagement. And one other point that around something else that's different from engagement is participation is truly different from engagement. Sometimes within the benefits function especially, or even sometimes people who work in internal communications, they tend to talk about participation as engagement. And what I would really argue is that if you're just asking people to click a link or do something, go through the motions, do something that you're paying them to do, that's really not employee engagement. That is participation. So employee engagement is more about that emotional connection that you can't really purchase or you can't, just check the box on. It has to be formed over time. So one of the things I always want to make sure people know, and many of you who work in the engagement space know this already, engagement has been shown over and over and over again to be statistically connected to people results and business results. So here are just 3 examples of some research studies that show the connection between employee engagement and important results. And I think what's important for you to know is this is just a sample. There are so many different studies that show that when you have an engaged workforce, you get better results. In fact, I kind of challenge people that I bet if your company's business result has been studied, and there's a really good research study out there. It's sort of this thing we call, it's like a truism in human resources, right? To say that we know there have been so many studies and so much consistent research, we just know it's better to have an engaged workforce. So these studies, I think, are interesting around engagement being related to higher stock price growth, higher levels of profitability, productivity, even safety. So what this one shows, this is a study by Sherm, that disengaged employees are 5 times more likely to have an accident. And even once employees have an accident, the average cost of a safety incident for engaged employees was way lower. So this particular study found that the average cost of a safety incident for engaged employees was $63, compared with an average of $392 for disengaged employees. So not only are you more likely to have a safety incident if you're disengaged, but it costs the company more. So this just kind of is so important for us to realize, is that the research and the science is so consistent on showing that it's better for our businesses to make sure that we are focusing on employee engagement. So that said, all the stuff that's happening right now in the world, I might argue that are these the results that matter the most? And I might say, actually, the more basic results that we can get from engagement might be the most important ones. And what I mean by that is, maybe because engagement really helps us feel such a deep emotional connection, maybe because it helps give us a sense of meaning and purpose and feeling valued and really that social connection, maybe those are the results that we should be caring about right now during this really difficult time in the world. That it's in a world full of so much negativity and uncertainty, a real lack of control. Maybe that's the most important thing we can be hoping for, is people feel that inspiration, they feel that meaning and purpose through their work. So I am a huge believer that employee engagement is where we should be focusing. So let's talk a little bit about the drivers of employee engagement. Remember a few minutes ago I was talking about this idea that sometimes organizations seem to think that engagement is almost like a personality trait, and let's get more of those people who are engaged, and let's not do all the hard work that we need to do to keep them engaged or create the conditions for engagement. And then if they're not engaged, too bad for them, and maybe we don't want them to work here. And it's crazy to me that we somehow have done that. And what I think is so important for organizations to understand is that we play a huge role in creating those conditions of engagement. So how do you do that? How do you create more engagement? You really have to focus on the statistical drivers of engagement. So this is some research we conducted in Limeade Institute a few years ago. And these are the constructs that have the strongest statistical relationship with an item that is, I feel personally engaged in my work. So you can see here, does my work have meaning and purpose? Do I feel like I'm growing? Do I enjoy the work itself? Am I making a difference? Am I using my strengths? Am I valued and respected? Do I feel supported by this organization? And then you can also see some things that maybe are a little bit different than you might see in other drivers of employee engagement lists, is this kind of aspects of well-being. So do I have kind of a manageable level of stress? How am I using my time at work? So there's a well-being component in here for sure. So what I'd like you to do is take a minute and think about this for yourself. We're all employees, right? Many of us are focusing on this for our organizations, but we're also employees. So think for a second, when was the last time that you felt that level of engagement, that energy, that connection, that the last time you kind of felt like, I can't wait to go to work? Think about that and think about these areas. Which of these areas for yourself were really the ones that stand out? Let's take a second to think about that. So for me, I really think that the meaning and purpose piece of engagement is huge. When I feel like I have this connection to something bigger, that I'm doing something that makes the world better. that's where I start to feel that energy and that emotional connection. When I feel, like I really am able to grow and get better, that's another thing for me. So I hope you can see in this list, again, these are statistical drivers, but I hope you can see yourself in this list too. That these are the kinds of things that need to happen in order for our employees to be engaged. One little kind of concept that you might want to think about is employee engagement. I think of it sort of as an engine of your organization. It's, the place where things are happening, where energy is created. And that's why it's connected to the results that we might care about. You might think about the idea of well-being as the fuel to that engine. How do you keep that engine going? How do you make sure that your employees can come to work and be able to give all of this? We have to be treating them like human beings. We have to make sure that their well-being is an important part of this conversation. So well-being is sort of the fuel to the engagement engine. And that's why we see the statistical drivers related to well-being show up here. And it's also really something that I think makes sense to people. It's really this idea that we have to treat people like people if we're going to be able to get these high levels of performance over time. So what I hope you see here is just this idea of mutual commitment. What is the organization doing to support me? Is the organization really creating these conditions for me to be engaged? So let's really, I think now, go to another poll question. So how does your organization focus on employee engagement? So the options are not at all, not at all. We really don't focus on it. We focus on it, but only through measurement of infrequent surveys. We focus on employee engagement, but only through the measurement using frequent surveys. Or we focus on employee engagement through measurement and through daily employee experiences. If you would, go ahead and answer that question.
Laura, while we're waiting for people to input what they're doing at their organizations, what's your guess on this question? Where do you think most people may fall?
Good question, Lauren. I bet because we have such a high level of people who have this as a primary responsibility, I bet they're leaning towards either maybe the third option or even the fourth one. That they're starting to, really, because of, having people who have dedicated jobs makes me think that they'd be, pretty savvy in understanding that it's not just about surveys. So what do you think, Lauren?
Well, I'm actually really curious to see these results. I know that we have more of an international audience joining us today than I think you and I work with on a daily basis here in the United States. And so I'm curious to see, I think normally I'd probably lean towards what you shared, but now that we have some folks spread out across the globe, I'm really interested to see if this might be a little bit different, if we see those same patterns on that global scale. So I'm eager to see what people share.
That's a really good point. Well, maybe it's time for us, we can go ahead and see. Let's see what the responses are. Interesting. Okay, so a small percentage, the smallest percentage says, not at all, we don't focus on employee engagement. The second biggest, only through infrequent surveys. Then there are some people who are, a smaller number, 12.5, that says, frequently. But then there's 42.5 that thinks about it through both measurement and daily experiences. So kind of interesting how we have that kind of that dip there in the middle. So I think that's also interesting, right, that we've got almost about the same amount of people who are just thinking about it through infrequent surveys as the daily experiences. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for answering that. I think it's so interesting to see what a distribution we have and how so many companies are in different places, right, when they're thinking about this topic. So now what I want to do is hand this over to Lauren to really dig into how we really think about those daily experiences with regard to employee engagement. So Lauren, you want to take it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, thank you for setting up that foundation so well around what is employee engagement and really focusing on the feeling that employees get and digging into those drivers that we know matter to every employee. So for those of you joining us today, Laura and I wanted to do something a little bit different than maybe you're used to hearing and seeing on webinars. We actually wanted to tell some stories about 3 different employees and how they're experiencing work in their current environment. And as we're sharing these stories, I want you to listen in for some of those drivers that Laura shared and maybe what's not going super well for these employees. What are some of those drivers that are missing and it's impacting their ability to feel engaged at work? We're then going to kind of flip the script and talk about how their experience could have been different if there was technology there to kind of, be that interrupter of that moment and really provide them with that moment of care and that moment where that driver can be addressed. So we'll tell 3 stories and then we're going to flip the script just to paint the picture of what this looks like for individual employees. I think, it's one thing to dig into the research and it's so helpful to lay the foundation, but as Laura mentioned, employee engagement is not about these surveys and numbers. It's about people, the people in your organization and their individual employee experience. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to start with the story of Josue. Josue is a couple months into his role on the marketing team. And he's starting to realize that he's taking on a lot more responsibility than was described during his interview process. He's noticed that on his weekends, he's spending a lot of time on email. And he's starting to worry about what he has to do on Monday, even on Saturday morning. His engagement is quickly waning. And he also finds himself extra tired most days before work even starts. What's interesting is that his boss keeps praising him about the great work he's doing, but he hasn't even noticed that Josue is lacking energy and doesn't have that same excitement he had when he started only a couple months ago. So despite being fairly new to his job, Josue wonders, how long can I keep this up? Next, let's talk about Aparna. Aparna is a receptionist at the remote location of her global company. She is that person that keeps the office moving. She is so respected by her colleagues for her attitude, for her organization, and just being somebody that they want to work with. There's an opportunity to apply for a women's leadership course offered by her global HR team, and she has to talk to her supervisor in order to get approval. During the conversation with her supervisor, she's pretty clear with Aparna. I think it's great you want to apply, but your job is to answer the phones, greet people, keep us all organized, and Aparna, you seem really happy doing that. I don't really see why you need a leadership course to do your job. Plus, I need you 100% here. Aparna goes back to her desk and feels her opinion towards the company shifting. Finally, let's talk about Cameron. Cameron is a doctor working the graveyard shift at a university hospital. It's her first week on the job, and she's feeling at a loss for where she fits in and who to go to for what. Her manager is so busy and just seems so stressed out that Cameron feels fearful to reach out to her about simple questions like, how do I make sure my paycheck is set up correctly? How do I check my PTO balance? Does her manager even recognize that she's here? Her peers try to help, but they've been at the hospital for so long, they don't know how to point her in the right direction. Soon, Cameron just kind of fades into the background, doubting if this is really the right place for her. All right, let's flip the script. Let's talk about how these experiences could have been different. Now, I want you to think about your own organization. Might there be a Josue, an Aparna, or a Cameron at work right now? With these examples, none of these are egregious, crazy things that happen to these employees that make them doubt their experience. There's subtle little ways where care isn't being shown. And so imagine if you had, the ability to connect with those employees and really show them that care using technology. So we want to paint a picture of how each of these experiences could be different with those subtle little nudges. We're going to focus on these 3 employees, and we want to make sure we also talk about what's going on in today's environment and share some examples of what this could look like in response to COVID-19. So let's start with Josue. So remember, he was starting to feel that sense of burnout and starting to notice that he's stressed out and he doesn't have that same sense of energy that he had when he started. So for Josue, a moment of care could be his manager actually receiving some sort of nudge that reminds him, hey, check in with your team, see how their well-being is. Or for Josue, it could actually look like a nudge encouraging him to take time to recharge. Or maybe it's about reminding him that he had some time off and he can take that to recover from feeling burnt out. Or maybe Josue actually needs to go back to some of the basics and understand, what does taking care of my well-being at work look like? Or for Josue, maybe taking care of himself happens in community with other people. And he needs to learn about the Monday meditation group that's happening virtually that he can join and just take 15 minutes out of his day to focus on himself. So again, they're small little things that are focusing on showing care for Josue that can impact his overall employee engagement. So let's shift and talk about Aparna, where I'll pass to you to share more about how Aparna's experience could have been different.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So remember, Aparna, she was so excited about the opportunity to grow her career, but her manager or supervisor really shut her down pretty fast, definitely didn't give her any encouragement. So what if her supervisor had gotten this clear message from the company, from the employer, that really said, we support employees in their growth. We expect you as supervisors to do that. That really not only was it okay, but it was very much encouraged for supervisors to help employees take advantage of those amazing opportunities to learn and grow. What if maybe Aparna was encouraged to talk with her manager and ask for more of what she likes doing, and really that we could show her the connection between her own work and the vision of the company, so she could see that she's really doing a lot to help the organization be successful. So, oops, sorry, that was me. So one company that we work with has created a talent marketplace. So they've created this a way to think about talent in the organization and how people can get new career and growth opportunities within the organization. So talk about, showing in the daily work that they support employee growth and development when they have a whole tool and platform around that movement, that internal movement, and that they make a huge deal about, people taking advantage of that talent marketplace. So imagine what a different experience Aparna might have had if she worked in a company like that. So the clear messaging of what's important, what's expected from managers, and in this case, how growth and development is really supported.
Mm-hmm. Finally, let's shift back. Oh, you're all good. You're all good. Let's shift back to Cameron. So for Cameron, she was excited. She's a brand new employee. She's just lacking some of the most basic information to feel like she's set up for success at her organization. So for Cameron, it's less about things right now around meaning and purpose. Like Laura talked about, it's less about that, job and identity and skill fit. It's really just making sure that she has what she needs to feel like she can focus on her job. So it could just be some sort of communication from her organization saying, welcome, let's get you all set up. Let's make sure you have the information you need. Or it could be a way where she can easily access her HR team and send them questions right from her phone. Notice that her manager actually didn't have time just to, answer some of these questions, or at least Cameron perceived that she was so busy and stressed out. So this gives Cameron a way where she can quickly get that information that she needs directly from the HR team. And maybe when the time is right for Cameron's manager, she receives some nudges and some information to understand what's going on with her direct reports and recognize them for the work that they're doing. Even during that stress, she needs a little reminder to just set up time for feedback and make sure that Cameron and her fellow colleagues know that they're cared for. So what we hope you see with these examples is that engagement isn't a survey. It's not about your employees as a number that's increasing, decreasing, and changing over time. It's about these day-to-day experiences and how they can show up at work and how you can be an active agent in helping them feel that, really that energy and like they have what they need to do their jobs. So we also recognize that right now, maybe some of these examples don't feel as relevant in our current environment. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how to care for your employees during times of crisis. So maybe now what's most important is less about things like, the leadership courses, but it's actually just about reminding employees that you're there. So it could be a message from the CEO or maybe from your CHRO just saying, hey, we're here for you, we support you. It could also still be that same Ask HR nudge where employees feel like they can ask questions, especially when they're feeling uncertain or fearful. Just get that reassurance and that direct line to support. Or maybe it's actually a direct connection to what's going on with the World Health Organization and the connection to a Twitter feed and just making sure that people have the right information, the information that they can trust. There's so much information going on around COVID-19, so how can you ensure your employees are connected to trusted sources? So it could look like these types of communications, or it could be, again, more nudges that are encouraging people to look at their own behavior and support one another during this time. So it could look like recognizing a coworker. It could be some sort of way that the company is listening. So a weekly pulse, just checking in, how can we help? How can we be there for you? Or just taking a well-being moment. So we know that COVID-19, during this time, nobody has all the answers. So taking action could look more like just listening and being there and showing up than having all of those answers for your employees. So we wanted to leave you with a couple ideas around what you could do at your organization. And I'd imagine many of you have already kind of responded and been working hard on this, and it has consumed a lot of your time. And I think both Laura and I would say thank you so much for all you're doing to care for your employees during this difficult time. If you're still searching for more ways where you can demonstrate care and really think about your employees during this time, we have some resources on our website. You'll see that URL down below. We're also happy to connect and provide some more ideas. Both Laura and I can be reached at info@limeaid.com. On that website, we have lots of ideas for content that you can deliver to your employees and just ways to show care. So it might look like for you just providing resources to your managers, giving some tip sheets for what managers and leaders can be doing right now. It could be reminders around staying connected and encouraging people to share their work from home space, to share their new work from home partner, their dog or their kid. Or maybe it's if you work in a company that has a manufacturing population or a population that's, actually an essential worker and has to be at work right now. Maybe it's just ensuring that they have meals and delivering lunch. We could encourage you to focus on well-being, giving people regular breaks, understanding how you can support them at home. One of the things we're actually doing this Thursday at LimeAid is a meeting-free day. So we've asked employees to cancel all meetings so that they can just focus on their well-being and what they need to continue to do their job effectively. And finally, it's so critical during this time to communicate with employees and just remind them of the resources that they have and just those reminders that you're there to support them. So this could look like information directly from your leadership, if that's possible. We at Limeade, our leaders are actually rotating who posts the video and sends it out to employees, and it's been so nice to hear from all leaders as an employee and know that they're there. And with these communications, we just encourage them to be regular. Another thing that I've really appreciated as an employee is we actually get information the week before to know what will be happening the following week. So I get an update on Friday, what will be happening the next week. And it just gives me some predictability, some stability during this time, knowing that my organization is thinking about, okay, how can we provide people with some information that makes them feel set up for success in this time of uncertainty and we don't know what tomorrow will bring. So we hope this leaves you with some ideas around what you can do right now in this incredibly stressful and uncertain time to really focus on employee engagement for each employee and demonstrate care. So Laura, I'll pass back to you to wrap up with our takeaways, and then I think that leaves us with plenty of time for some Q&A. So back to you, Laura.
Thanks, Lauren. So yeah, just to wrap things up, and we hope that you take away these main points. First, that engagement really is about day-to-day experiences. It's not a one-time survey. And it matters so much that your employees feel engaged. It's better for them. It's better for their life experience, for their human experience to feel engaged. And it's also better for your business. We know that technology can help you think about creating those day-to-day experiences that reinforce engagement and that really personalize engagement. I think we saw with those 3 examples that people are in different places. They need different things. And technology can really help you personalize that. And I think overarchingly, we really just need to change the way we think about employee engagement and really move away from it, thinking about it as this one-time thing or this project or an initiative, and much more about what happens in the day-to-day. So we want all employees and really all companies to feel the magic of employee engagement and really reap the benefits of it too. So those are the key takeaways that we have. We are so grateful for your time today, but I think we can now open it up to Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura and Lauren. That was fantastic. There's so much to take in there. And predictably, as a result, we have quite a few questions to try and rattle through in the 10 minutes we have left. So we'll do our best. Okay, let's get the Q&A going. So the first question I have is from Ashley Harper from Worksited. Ashley asks to both of you, do you have any recommendations for fun virtual activities we can do with our teams during this time? I suppose with the primary focus here being engagement and keeping that engagement moving during this time. Laura, I'll put that first to you if you don't mind. Do you have any recommendations for kind of virtual activities HR leaders can undertake with their teams during this time?
Yeah, there are so many good ones. And I think we all are hearing about the companies who are doing the virtual happy hours and just creating this space for open dialogue. So we do virtual happy hours. We're doing Ask Me Anything sessions, just 30-minute sessions with leaders where employees are encouraged to ask them anything, including personal kinds of things about their lives. So I think that a lot of people know about creating those opportunities. And, those make me really, think about the future and hopefully as we are able to reintegrate, how we keep more of that going. There's smaller versions of that. Like, I think it's fun when people are doing, bring your pet to the meeting or, wear your craziest hat. So there's just, I think, so much creativity that's been happening around those kind of fun connections. I think there's also stuff that is like more team building that I'm seeing. In fact, this Friday night, we're doing a paint and sip with, everything being virtual. So, doing having a teacher who's teaching us how to do a particular painting, but everybody brings their own art supplies and everybody brings their own preferred beverage. And so there's those kinds of things that are happening too. But I'm seeing also smaller things and just funny, like a lot more gifts that are in Teams chat, really just more picture sharing of things that people are doing in their lives. So I love so much the increased social connection, and you can see that deep desire that we all have to be with people, right? And so I hope that a lot of this continues as we start transitioning. Lauren, is there anything you'd add to that? I'm sure I missed some good ideas.
I think those are all great ones. And, I love one of the things that I really loved is you gave the example of like bringing your pet to work. Some people at Limeade actually started, making this rule where if you see, somebody walk by in the screen, a kid, a spouse, a roommate, that you have to come introduce that person. And I think it's just kind of making people feel okay and normalize that experience of that we can't really control our work environment if you're working from home right now as much as you're used to, and just normalizing that and creating that community. Another really cool idea that I think is also one that can be really helpful for people is doing like virtual tours of your workspace to help people get ideas for how they can create a workspace at home that works for them. And I think just idea sharing around ways to set up that office that feels productive for people. So that's another really cool idea. I love that doing virtual games as just a way to let people kind of have fun and be human. So I know there's tons of games that I've started to create virtual versions like Codenames and Pictionary. So that's just a way to maybe at the end of the day give people that chance to wind down. But it's really cool to see all the creativity. So I definitely agree with that, Laura.
Fantastic. Thank you to both of you. And thank you, Ashley, for that question as well. That was great. We've had not a question, but a suggestion here that I'm just going to pop in from Kelly Spears from Equinox Business. Kelly suggests what her business did, which is they got a virtual cooking class with a chef in lockdown in Italy with their team, which sounds amazing. I'm remarkably jealous of that, but thank you for that, Kelly. Okay, let's move on to another question now. This is from David North from Career Innovation. David asks to both of you again, what would you suggest to supervisors who are normally very good at engaging with their people face-to-face, but now they're working remotely from them and they're experiencing challenges in doing that? So, Lauren, I'll start with you this time, if you don't mind. What would you suggest then for those leaders who are usually feel good engaging face-to-face, but virtually they seem to be struggling?
Well, actually, Michael, I was going to pass this one to Laura because, Laura, I can imagine you can really relate to this question. I know that you have a team in person and that you love to get to collaborate with them face-to-face, and this has been a new journey for you working remotely.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to defer to Laura to share some
Go ahead.
So, Lauren, that's exactly what he asked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me right now. I have an amazing team of people on the people team and the Limeade Institute, and we are all usually sitting together. And I realized how much I counted on being able to kind of have little conversations in the hallway or before and after meetings, or even, during meetings that help me feel connected and aligned, like that we're on the same page with things. And so this has been a real struggle, and it's probably, related to my age probably too, but it's been a really hard thing for me because it feels like a void. Like I don't have all those opportunities. And so what I'm just trying so hard to do is I'm using different aspects of technology, right? I'm using Teams, I'm using existing meetings we have, I'm texting people, I'm calling people. I'm just realizing that I have to find new ways to get that sense of connection and to be able to talk about just those little pieces of our work that in the hallway would have been a quick question, but right now we don't have a mechanism for. So I'm really trying to learn and grow and try different approaches and see what works. And it's a bit of an experiment right now, but I do think it's going to make me better, make us better, because I think about all of our employees who actually, I don't happen to have people on my team who are distributed generally, but a big chunk of our employees at Limeade are. So I was thinking about, gosh, how unfair is that I have these, in person, when we're in person, I have those times to connect with people, but all those people who are normally distributed don't have that opportunity to get those kinds of small connection points throughout the day as much. So I feel like I'm getting more empathy and more growing some skills and using some different tools to maybe be able to help that in general. So it is a real, I think, challenge. I am just trying every day to connect with all of the people who are my direct reports in some way, shape, or form, just to find some way to just check in, see if there's anything they need, see how they're doing. And that's what I'm working hard at. But Lauren's right. This is a real thing that, I'm challenged with for sure.
And Laura, the only thing I would add to that, I think that was really good perspective. So my husband actually runs a team of people, and they're normally all together in the same office. And I've kind of watched secondhand him, try and understand this new world. And I think one of the things that we've really been talking about is just increasing that level of trust right now in employees. And if you're used to always being around and seeing people, and now you don't have that ability, sometimes it can kind of, I see for him, an extra heightened sense of sensitivity of, gosh, do they feel supported? Do they have what they need? Are they working? And I think it's just about increasing that trust and just checking in and making sure that they do feel like they have what they need and listening, rather than getting in your head and being fearful of, are they doing what they need to do? And so that's definitely something that I've seen from him. And just, I would say, David, just asking turning inward and really making sure that you have that trust in your employees right now, especially when just so much is being challenged in the way that people work.
I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question very quickly now, just before we wrap up. We are running out of time. Thank you for that question there. One more question here from Zakwan Ahmad from KWSP. Now, Zakwan asks, how can leaders be sure to communicate effectively in times like this, particularly in that some staff could be working very hard in the situation, but some staff could actually be taking advantage of the situation to not maybe be so committed to the organization, maybe relax a bit more, who knows. But what would be your opinion on how leaders can cope with this issue, as this seems to Zakwan to be quite a big issue in engagement? Laura, do you have an opinion on that, how leaders can react?
Yeah, I think it's the regular, continuous communication using multiple modes is for sure the approach you should take. I think, connecting people back to the goals and making sure people really understand how important their roles are to the company being successful. We use this term line of sight. Does an individual employee really have the line of sight to see how my work, what I do every single day, how that connects maybe first to my department and what my department's trying to do, and then next to how our company is going to be successful. And a lot of times some of us think, well, it's obvious, right, that connection, but for employees, sometimes it's not obvious. So what I would highly recommend is making sure every employee has that line of sight. You have that conversation with them about how their day-to-day work connects to the success of the business. And so then you can help people see that, like, this, you matter here, and I need you, right? And I need you to really lean in during this time especially and make sure, we're being successful. So helping people see the role that they play in the company being successful right now is, I think, the best way to come at it. To Lauren's point about trust, like coming down and, asking people to check in and check out or do crazy things that really break down trust, I do not recommend that. I highly recommend connecting people to the meaning and purpose of the company.
Fantastic. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that before we wrap up?
No, I think Laura summarized that perfectly. So thank you, Laura.
Fantastic. All right, I'm afraid we're out of time. That's about all we have time for. Thank you so much, Laura and Lauren, for fascinating insights there and for fielding those questions. It was absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much to everyone at home for listening and tuning in from isolation. To those of you who have been asking, and it is a few of you, yes, this will be available on demand from HRD Connect from the same link you will have joined it from live after the session if you want to go back, enjoy some of these insights again, and take them on board once more. Thanks again to my speakers from Limeade, and thanks for tuning, everyone, and stay tuned for more from HRD Connect very soon.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.